I'm Nate Lind, and I help people interested in buying or selling online businesses get the transaction done without the deal falling apart. If you're looking to buy or sell online businesses, then be sure to keep tuning in for more videos like this one. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications about new videos and interviews. And introduce yourself in the comments. Are you a buyer or a seller? Enjoy the interview. Hi, everybody. Nate Lind here. I have another who's who among the online mergers and acquisition space. We have Website Closer's own Ron Matheson. Ron's one of the senior brokers. He's been around for a long, long time and has a ton of experience with M&A. Ron, can you share with us a little bit in your own words, your background and how you got to this point?
Sure. I actually started off in the world of retail. I opened one store in a major regional mall, which became 22 stores. Most of them were art galleries, some were art and framing stores, some were other. Ran that for about 15 years, got out of it, took a few years off, played a lot of golf, got bored, decided I needed to be a little bit more productive, so I made an offer on a business which failed due diligence. 3 more offers, all failed due diligence. Finally decided if I was going to buy a company, I should probably see it from the inside as a broker. So I became a broker. I did buy a couple companies. One was an advertising company. One was an RV rental company. Held those for a couple years, but I liked the brokering side, so I spun them both off. Stayed with brokering, did about probably 80 to 100 deals to begin with in the bricks and mortar sector. About 2010, started to move towards digital. Knew that was a very dynamic, exciting space, so there was no turning back then. Met Jason Geraghty not long after that. He and I formed this company. From that point, we have grown it now to the point where we represent, I think, close to 300 parties worldwide. So in our sector, we are now the biggest in the world. I think one of the reasons that we have been able to achieve this is, number one, we're working with a lot of great people around us, not only that are part of our company, but outside of our company, such as lenders that understand the space, due diligence experts that understand the space, attorneys who are very good at what they do in this space. And I think that kind of brings us up to date.
Okay, awesome. Ron, I know you have done a metric ton of deals, and in those have been some hairy ones. Can you pick one out of your experience that was a particularly hairy deal, and how, if you guys were able to get over the finish line, and if you didn't, that's fine too. I'm curious about the ones that were jogged up in there. But then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the do's and don'ts that lessons learned that you got from that experience.
Sure, and we can kind of take it back to the beginning, because all deals, the saying, have hair on them, and there's something that's going to go wrong in every deal. And early in the game, I've seen people who had literally not a penny to their name, who took money off of credit cards, able to buy companies using bank financing. I have seen deals that the numbers were so bad on them that I can think of one in particular that took 18 months to close because it took that long to get ahead of, the numbers, which were so bad, it was unbelievable to finally get a bank on board with it. Bringing us up to date more recently, since Jason and I started, we had one particular gentleman that bought into a certain sector that he really didn't belong in, but he finally had the brains at the end to get this closed by partnering up with somebody who did understand it. And so, that deal was definitely going to go by the wayside. Now, some specifics, though, are like recently, for example, we had one that, in our world, there's a lot of people that break rules. And, there's certain things, everybody's gray. We don't care about gray. Everybody goes gray. That's normal. But when people cross that gray line and they go into the dark side, that's a little bit of a different story. And so there's one person we were working with that was making millions in profits. And, he was definitely way, way past the line. And so, in our position, we made it mandatory that every single buyer on the phone or in meeting him in person had to understand exactly what he was doing, because there's no way we wanted anybody getting involved in something that, kind of blindsided them. And so that one we actually had under contract with a group that, it was interesting because this is in the skincare sector, and that group was a manufacturer that had them under contract. And the deeper they got into it, the more they understood, he was in an area where he could literally get banned tomorrow. And, we had many conversations down the stretch, and we found a place actually where we could kind of build some support around it where, there was a certain amount that came to the closing table, and then it was being released at certain times down the road. And it really was a tough deal to do because, we're very aware of how far over the line he was. So was the buyer, and the buyer actually needed a company like that because, they had no experience in the internet side or Amazon side. And so it was extremely helpful for them to be able to absorb a guy who really was killing it. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation because I think even in those situations, and I certainly know internet marketing, it's still a bit of the Wild West out there, and there's all sorts of ways that you can push and pull to make things happen. And manufacturers in particular make some pretty good buyers for that type of aggressive marketing because they're already manufacturing the product. And if it's kind of a risk allocation and they understand what the risk is, but they also can recognize what the reward is too. We've put together a couple of deals like that. Isn't that right?
Oh yeah, a few of them. Actually, in that particular one, what you just mentioned is 100% on the money. And that's one of the things we pointed out to him is that the company, I think, was making 2.7 million on their trailing 12. And, the amount that he was paying for the products it was probably a savings, I'd say, of about 30-40%. And so that alone kind of mitigated the risk on the buyer side because immediately over a period of time, they could get a return on their original down payment. We had it within 14 months. So the deal kind of normalized at the 14-month level and then just became at that point, everything locked in and guaranteed.
Got it. Ron, are there any do's and don'ts that you see for sellers that's kind of applicable right now? I know you've seen so many deals. I'm sure there's some trends that you see for things that sellers are doing that they maybe shouldn't be doing. Let's start there.
I think the main thing that we have as a problem with sellers is, well, two things actually. Expectations, because everybody hears about somebody else selling a company, and chances are we are the ones that were involved in the sale. And so we know what the details were on that sale. And everybody thinks, okay, well, I do just as much in profit or in sales, shall we say, as that other company. So why are they worth so much more than we are? And there's about 100 different things that come into play when you're valuing a company, and they have no idea the attributes that the other company that's sold for. And so they're thinking, okay, this is what I'm worth. But in the end, the market will speak. And buyers are smart. They understand exactly what they're getting and what they're paying for, and they're willing to pay for more when they're getting more. And so, if there's affiliate networks or, heavy social media content and all the rest of it that can make a company more valuable, or in some cases, maybe somebody has a very limited amount of SKUs. And, if you've got all your SKU concentration into one particular product, you've got a problem, because if you ever lost that, and actually when we talk about distressed companies, that would be another example. I mean, we had one company that came to us that, we decided to go to market for well into the 8 figures. It was about 40 million. And not long after we went to market, we went under contract, and not long after we went under contract, his sales on the main product, which represented about 67%, started going down. And so obviously any buyer during a scenario like that, they didn't make an offer based on the fact that they might want to buy the company. They make an offer based on the fact they want to buy the company. And so, they're trying to find ways of staying in the game. And one of the best ways to do that is just stall the process out. And so they'll slow it down, and instead of closing in maybe 75 to 90 days, they'll close in, they'll say, well, let's push it back a month, and then let's push it back another month. And so, that's one of the ways that they have of being able to do that. Now, in the end, we ended up doing that deal, even though he was down probably 40% on that one product by the time we closed. And the reason why we ended up doing the deal is because the person who was buying the company had completely different skills than the seller. And so they actually had something each other needed. And so, once again, we kind of mitigated the deal to bring less risk to the buyer. And we were actually able to get that to the finish line recently, where there wasn't a whole lot of money that changed hands at the closing table. The money was coming, in tranches down the road. So kind of an interesting scenario. But the other things that sellers, we really want to make sure that the sellers understand is that they come to us and they don't understand their numbers. Like, we're working with one right now that the balance sheet is massive. They owe so much money. that, we've determined that the value of the company is maybe less than what they owe. So are they willing to come out of pocket at the closing table to actually sell their company? Because that's probably the only way they can sell their company. And one of the problems they've got is that they took one product line they started with, which did really well at first, but then it began to lose traction. Then they moved into another one that is really super promising, and it's moving up really quickly. It's actually the new one that's got value. The old one doesn't have a lot of value. And so, when it comes to the numbers, it's everywhere from, for example, the balance sheets. I mean, they have to make sense. If, your debt is so high that it can't accommodate a sale of a company. And most people don't quite understand the moving parts. For example, one of the things that this particular gentleman said was that if, when they buy my company, they'll be buying my inventory, and that's what we'll be using then to buy, out this particular piece of debt. It's like, well, no, when we tell you what your company is worth, it has to come with working capital. Your inventory is part of your working capital, which means that's being part of the closing, price that they're paying you. And so, what they have to understand is that, in this particular case, they actually are going to need, which we have somebody that we've already introduced them to, but they probably are going to need a turnaround consultant to make their company valuable, because there is a valuable part of that company. But unless they're willing to go renegotiate, the terms of the deals, the debt they've got on the books, I don't see any way to hit them.
Got it. Yeah, it's fascinating to me, the psychology that goes into both the seller and the buyer, and the time that all transpires as it goes through this. Can you comment anecdotally, kind of like where you see mindsets start out with? Like, there's got to be jubilation when when a seller signs a listing agreement and they get listed, and they've got all these amazing expectations, and I guess like the market is the market so buyers will respond, and they depending on how they're responding, kind of dictates and sets into reality. What's that process like for you when you're working with your sellers, going through that process?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, because it's kind of all over the board. Some people who come to us, they've been doing it for a long time. They've made enough money, so that they feel like they're probably set for life, and so they're really tired of what they're doing. Just because I think there's a certain period of time in any business that you run. I mean, even I was in the art gallery business, and that was a lot of fun. You went to a lot of parties of artists, and you met a lot of famous people, and it was a lot of fun doing what I did. But after doing it for 15 years, it became kind of, I wasn't creative anymore. Once I was the innovator, at that point I was not. I knew it was time to get out. And so some people come to us and they've been doing this just a little bit too long. They've experienced a lot of the headaches that are involved in running a company and building a company. And so they get to the point where, they say, okay, price me in the middle, because, the price of a company is a market range. There's a low to a high on the market range. And so they'll say, you know what, price me at the middle. Let's hope we get it. But, I don't want to go lower than the low part, but just buy me a buyer. And so they're really motivated to sell, get this done, and get them behind. Then there's other people that kind of just work from a strategic standpoint, saying, okay, why don't we do this? What if we were to, price the company a little higher than the middle, okay, and let's try to get that. And I'm willing to wait a little bit of time, and, we'll find a buyer. I am motivated to sell, and let's start on that premise. Now, when we start on those, usually those are the ones we like a lot, because we're priced high. We like to go high. Occasionally, you will find people who will pay a larger amount than others will for a company. Everybody thinks that they come in, and we hear this all the time. Well, what if we talk to a synergistic buyer that's already in our sector, and that way we can get top dollar? That's usually the exact opposite. Usually, a synergistic buyer understands the sector very well. They're willing to pay a certain, amount on the multiple, and after that, not a dime more, because they already know the exact value to them that company has. And so, usually the synergistic ones are not the best buyers, but you might have somebody who is looking, they own a company, and they're saying, we need to find other sectors that are synergistic with what we're doing, so that, we can make money on both sides just by owning the two parts. So kind of like, for example, that manufacturer, he didn't have any internet sales. He needed the internet sales, and he could hedge his bet by, doing the manufacturing for that company. So, in each case, you're looking for something that's specific, and oftentimes you may be willing to overpay, or shall we say, fully pay for a company that has more value to you than others. And so, those are the ones we like the most, that we price a little bit high, but not dramatically. We always find buyers for those, and it's very comfortable. Then you have the third group that comes in, and they say that their, say, $10 million company is really worth 20. And there isn't somebody out there that's going to pay 20. Now, if that $10 million company, and he's looking for 20, sometimes what will happen though is somebody will come in and, once again, they need a sector, or there's something that's going on in that company that's going to benefit them tremendously. They will pay more. But it's like finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, 99% of your buyers are not that buyer. And so, everybody thinks that buyer is just waiting in the wings to jump in and, snag their company for, a multiple that's above market because they need them so bad. But that's actually not the case. It doesn't work out like that. Most of the buyers who come in to buy companies, they're looking for opportunity, not a sector. In other words, they don't come in saying, I specifically want this company. They come in and say, what do you have that shows me opportunity that I think I would like and would fit my skill set?
Ron, can you share a story of a buyer that came in and paid top dollar and then went on to just crush it? Do you have some examples of that and kind of what happened there?
Yeah, and that one is actually an interesting one because we found a particular, for this company, we went to market pretty high. And surprisingly, we got above asking, which does happen too. Once again, the market will speak. Some people think that they should price a company way above market to see if they can get it, and that's actually not the case. If you price a company at middle to a little bit above middle, and you get several people that come in and they all want the company, they'll drive the price up. So, we've sold many, many times companies that are above asking. Kind of like when not that you would ever compare this to the housing market, but people are familiar with that market, and you can come out with a house in San Francisco and 5 people want it and they all start bidding on it. Well, that occasionally happens in business as well. And so in this particular case, we had actually 3 offers above asking, okay, in this company. And I think that the highest one was 35 million and the lowest was 30, and we came to market, I think, at 28. And so what ended up happening was, it was a pretty big company. They were working on several deals at the same time. They closed 2 in a row. And on the third one, they felt that they were a little short-staffed. The third one was the one we actually were representing. Okay, and so they said, you know what, we're going to hold off on this one. We're just, a little bit too short-staffed on it. Now, what happened is one of the guys that was, working with that group was also an entrepreneur. He was very bright. One of the partners in the equity group decided they would get together and they bought a minority position in that company. So they actually pulled their own money together, personal funds outside of the group, and went ahead and made that purchase. Now, in the end, they only bought a small percentage of the company, less than a majority stake. And the reason that, the seller was excited about that is because he knew these guys knew so much more than he did. He created a great company, obviously. I mean, company that's worth over 30 million, you did something pretty special to get there. But these guys were so good at what they did that, that's kind of what the seller was thinking, is that these guys could really help me to add a zero. And fast forward, they've added a zero. I mean, they are killing.
That's awesome. Ron, are there any other things that's top of mind for you? Anything that's near and dear, special to your heart right now that you'd like to share with buyers and sellers that are active and interested in the online M&A space right now? Anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, it's a great time and a great sector. And the interesting part is, and obviously there's a lot of tragedy in our society today with the virus. And I think that an unfortunate positive that's coming. I mean, it's a fortunate positive, but anything right now you look at as negative when people are dying, but our sector is holding up pretty well. I mean, Amazon stock has gone up tremendously since it started. Last I looked, I think it was at 2,100 and it was down to 1,700, not long ago. And so it's showing the resilience of our particular sector. And our particular sector is, it's definitely the future. And a lot of people knew that from the past, just because, if you just look at the demographics and everything else, it just makes sense. But I think now more and more people are starting to understand why this sector is so dynamic and why it really is kind of, bulletproof in a way. So.
Yeah,
And,
I totally agree with you. It's been interesting seeing the results of many e-commerce companies. Of course, ones that are related to to travel and that sort of stuff have taken a hit. But e-commerce companies that are delivering products, if they're at least within 3 degrees of separation from essential products or household products or that sort of stuff, they're absolutely crushing it. We're seeing record sales from people within my sphere of influence that they've never experienced before. In the light of the kind of the COVID-19 pandemic and stuff. And I totally agree. It's unfortunate for all of the broader picture of things that are going on and people dying and that sort of stuff. When you look kind of at a small scale, just about e-commerce in particular. I mean, you're right. I can't say it better than you did. Bulletproof. I mean, those are the products that are being delivered. People are not going to retail locations in light of all of this and social distancing and stuff like that. And I think you would say, and you would know at a broader level, seeing the scope of all of us brokers within Website Closers, the activity is pretty hot.
it's awesome. It's interesting because when Jason and I, keep in mind, Jason now owns many of these companies, and he's doing very well through this, particular time period where a lot of other businesses are suffering. And, you take it back to the beginning, and right away when we formed this company, we knew it was the future because it made sense. I mean, I think you break everything down in some way to common sense. And just looking at the common sense factors on what we do, according to an article in the Wall Street Journal, there's 70% of securities in the stock market are held by people who are 50 and older. But the bulk of that 70% is actually between the guys who are in the baby boomers, which are 60 to 80s. And so, you look at that group outside of travel, that group is the least likely to spend money on the internet. Now, and that means in the next 5, 10, 15 years, there's a lot of money that's going to drop down into the hands of people who are fully comfortable with everything that goes on in the internet. So just from a financial demographic standpoint, it makes perfect sense. But then you also, look at it from a practicality standpoint as well. And, you look at it, most people who want to save money on, buying groceries and everything else will go to Walmart. And I don't think there's too many people on earth that will say Walmart is a, great experience that they love to do every week. I mean, if you're in a cold climate, you park in a parking lot, you walk across. If it's windy, cold, snowy, you put up with that. You get in there, you get jostled by people, you wait in lines. I mean, none of it is fun. In this particular, coming period that we're about to see, Amazon has built so many of these warehouses now. I think it's well over 100 that are 1 million square feet or more. And when they bought Whole Foods, they're now conquering groceries. They have right now 80 leases on grocery stores that they're going to be rolling out as well. So it's going to come a time in the not too distant future where you're going to push buttons, and they're going to ask you, what time do you want this delivered? And you're going to push the time, and they'll have it to your door at that particular time. So, a lot of people who are used to buying in a different fashion, on the old bricks and mortar side by driving into the parking lot and parking and walking in, that's going to start to disappear and be replaced by people who are going to push buttons and let it come to the door.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting to see how this evolves. Like there's stuff like Instacart for grocery shopping has completely changed my household. From the going to the grocery store and digging through and looking for stuff, and it would take easily an hour and a half to get a grocery cart full of groceries. Now, with Instacart, I can pick the same things I order every week, add the unique things here and there, and in 15 minutes, secure my order. Wait a couple hours, and somebody brings it to my door. It's amazing. I love it.
It is awesome. And, it's funny because, just even going down this road, this weekend, I was visiting my parents, and, obviously you're supposed to be locked down and they're used to going and getting groceries. And so while I was over there, I actually set them up on Sunday on Shipt. And on Monday, they received their first delivery. Now, that is not something we would have ever done if we were in normal times, but, because of the lockdown and everything and their fear at their age of having a problem, it was something they said, let's go ahead and give it a try. So now they're probably in the future going to use this, but they never would have done this otherwise.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Ron, I appreciate your time today. You're always a wealth of and a fountain of information in the M&A process. And any parting comments for our audience? Anything that's top of mind for you?
Yeah, if you've got a company to sell, come to us because we are very good at this. We have risen to the top for a reason. And our goal is not to make a commission. Our goal is to sell your company at top dollar. So.
Very well spoken. Ron, thank you for your time today. Everyone, stay tuned. We've got more interviews with the experts and the who's who in the M&A process. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate.